Hello guys, welcome to Ashish Academy again. Now it's a very important concepts as well as we are just introducing the AngularJS, and it's a very important framework for developing, you can say, web-based applications and the UI applications. We already know that in the earlier world, when we talk about developing any other web applications, so if you're talking about Java, so we generally use that JSP with embedded HTML codes. But compilations and you can say working with that backend code with the HTMLs, it is sometimes it is very difficult. And we also have that so many, after that there are so many new JavaScript frameworks got introduced. Maybe you heard about the Dojo. Then there is also very popular framework like a jQuery. So they have provided a much more extended support, and we have also used that plain JavaScripts, and most of the companies have developed their own JavaScript frameworks. But still, there are many challenges in the existing frameworks when we talk about binding, when we talk about responsiveness, when we talk about callback, or maybe uh, even processing like that, and reusable code as well. So that's why we are just looking for that very extended support and any other very rich framework for a JavaScript library. So we are just looking for and starting with the AngularJS. Now we will see what is the AngularJS in these sessions. Then also we will see what are the basically features, what are the advantages. So many things we will cover up here. So introduction. So AngularJS is a structural framework for dynamic web apps. So for static web apps, you don't need any other scripting or maybe even processing or some binding or something like that. Static web applications don't require it, but dynamic web applications, it is a very much popular. It lets you use that HTML as your template language and let you the extended HTML syntax to express your application components clearly and succinctly. So basically, HTML is basically a template language. So it will help it to you as a HTML as a template language. So you will have templates in the form of HTML, and you can use that template and bind it to a particular, or maybe use into your with your components, or maybe with your JavaScript code, and you can play around it. So AngularJS data binding and dependency injection eliminate much of the code you would otherwise have to write it. So basically data binding with your, so basically your dynamic, you can say, code, or maybe your data is banded with the particular HTML components or HTML code, or maybe any other HTML syntaxes. So it will be much more making your life easy when we talk about updating any other table, when you are creating a certain data onto or designing a particular page with some backend data, something like that. And it all happens within the browser, so you don't need to basically play at the server side. It will be happening everything at the server client side in the web browser only, making it as an ideal partner with the server technology. So it is just sharing that load basically from the server side to a basically client. So we just playing around and around only at the client side in the browser only. So AngularJS is what HTML would have been. It been designed for applications. HTML is a great declarative language for a static document. So we already know that basically any other HTML component, if you wanted to just design, we will use that HTML. It does not contain much in the weight for creating applications. For creating applications, because we need to also get some data, or maybe based on the user's request, then we need to design or maybe update that particular web page. So we are not able to do with the HTML only. That's why we need the JavaScript. And then we are submitting, and then we also need to have so many requirement. Basically, when we are sending a request, or maybe so how when we're getting the response, how we will the web page would like be, or maybe if you wanted to create any other component, or maybe any other HTML syntax need to be get updated, something like that. So there are so many things, right? So HTML as well as all so other JavaScripts are not making things very easy. Now So introduction, a library basically a collection of functions which are useful when writing a web apps. Your code is in the charge and it's called into a library when it sees fit, just like a jQuery. Framework is basically a particular implementation of a web application where your code fills in the details. The framework is in charge and it calls into your code when it needs something app specific like Durandal, Ember, etc. So basically that is the basically difference between library and the framework. Okay. AngularJS takes another approach. It attempts to minimize the impedance mismatch between the document-centric HTML and what an application needs by the creating a new HTML constructs. So basically, it is not very much, you can say just like a library or just like a framework. It is also have some extended support. And there is a concept like a document-centric HTML. So document-centric HTML means when we have HTMLs and the document is basically very much playing it or maybe focusing on the HTML and then application needs creating a new HTML constructs. So AngularJS teaches the browser new syntax through a constructor we call directives, right? So through directives, basically we can also create or maybe a new syntax and through a constructor. So we use that constructor approach basically here in AngularJS. And it is not like in earlier days when we create, so that is called as a basically a directives in the AngularJS. But when we also talk about earlier library or maybe a framework like jQuery or maybe Ember, in that case we have that HTML. We basically use that HTML code with the some kind of a functions from the JavaScript, just like a jQuery, and we design that content and like that. Maybe if you people have done some kind of a coding with the jQuery, so there is a validations, jQuery Ajax calls, maybe jQuery other. So other from functions as well where we can use and then we can just accordions also. So through that we just or maybe if we have any other basic task processing based on click or maybe any other event if you wanted to process it, so we just do it, right? But AngularJS have that directive approach, so we construct that HTML code through uh, you can say constructor and we call as a directive. So this particular directive, so there is so many directives are available, that is also we will see. And here is also a concept of a component, and then also we have a concept called a constructor. So AngularJS takes another approach. It attempts to minimize the impedance mismatch between the document-centric HTML, what an application needs by creating a new HTML constructs. AngularJS teaches the browser new syntax through a constructs we call as a directives. That is we already discussed. So data binding. So that is a basically it will bind that particular HTML with the data, and both the side when we update data then it will be automatically reflect into a HTML code, and we will change something in the HTML it will, so both side. So DOM controls structure for repeating, showing the hiding DOM fragments. That is very important. Support for forms and form validations. We already have that form and forms validations like that, submitting of forms and validation of a form. So we have inbuilt. So you don't need to validate each and every field, providing that yes, okay, it is an email or form or text or name or something like that. So whatever type of validations you required, it will providing a support, attaching a new behavior to a DOM element such as a DOM event handling. So basically there is a very important concept. So we have that DOM event handling concepts. So through an events, you can also trigger any other task, or if you want to do something, that is grouping of a HTML into a reusable component. So basically here is the concept of a component. So we create a component and there is a proper life cycle of a component, and in the life cycle methods, you can also embed the code and then you can process it. right? So that is very important, and this component concept was not available in earlier jQuery framework or any other library as well. So that's why it's very important. So the data binding is also very important. So AngularJS basically supports for MVC pattern, model view controller pattern. So here we already know that MVC pattern normally we follow into server side technologies. When we talk about model, maybe is what is a POJO, basically we refer as view, is generally we refer as any other UI component like a JSP or ASP, and controller is basically any other server component like a servlet or something like that. And then we receive that particular request into a controller, and then we use the data, and we, you can say, after doing some manipulation, processing the request, we send it to a view. So that is a basically MVC pattern. So Angular JS is also supporting to an MVC pattern. So that is also we're going to see, and then you will understand these features and other details.